In July of 1996, two fishermen made a shocking discovery when they pulled a dead body from the English Channel. Little did they know that this lifeless man had a remarkable story to tell. This unexpected catch would set off a chain of events that would take investigators on a transatlantic journey. It could have been the perfect crime, but a single clue, a Rolex watch, shattered the secrecy surrounding this international mystery. What sinister plot led one man across the globe and another to a watery grave? On July 28, 1996, a typical summer day in South England, Captain John Kopek and his son prepared for a day of fishing aboard their Brixham trawler Malcary. After an unsuccessful day of hauling, they decided to venture further into an area known as the Roughs. They lowered the net into the water, hoping for a better catch. As they patiently waited, they felt the familiar tug of a heavy load. Kopek assumed they had caught a large fish and began to bring the net back to the surface. However, to their astonishment, it was not a fish that emerged from the depths. Instead, the lifeless body of a man flopped onto their deck. Kopek wasted no time and immediately contacted the Brixham Coast Guard. The body was in a state of advanced decomposition, indicating that it had been in the ocean for quite some time. Although it had been partially consumed by fish, the man was impeccably dressed in a long-sleeved shirt, corduroy pants, and brown shoes. His pockets had been turned inside out, suggesting a possible robbery. There was no form of identification on the body, making it difficult to determine his identity. The only distinguishing features were a heavily smudged tattoo on his right hand and a Rolex watch adorning his wrist. The body was transported to the medical examiner's office in Devon for further examination. Based on the condition of the body, the man was estimated to be between 40 and 50 years old. The tattoo on his body appeared to be a cluster of stars, although it was difficult to make out due to the smudging. The only significant injury was to his head, which was not fatal. Bruising on his body indicated that he had been dragged along the seabed before being hauled onto the boat. The cause of death was determined to be drowning, a common occurrence in the area given the proximity of the English Channel. The authorities suspected that he may have fallen into the water during one of the ferry trips. The only viable option left was to identify him through his dental records. If he happened to be a British citizen, his information would be on file. So the examiner proceeded accordingly. However, this process would take some time. By chance, a mortuary technician noticed the man's watch, a fully waterproof Rolex Oyster self-winding watch that required movement to stay active for 48 hours. It was also possible to trace its ownership if it was an authentic piece. Upon examining the watch, investigators were able to determine that the man had drowned on July 20th, 1996, as indicated by the calendar feature displaying July 22nd. They also discovered a concealed serial number between the wristband and watch face. This number was sent to Rolex to verify its authenticity and service history. Meanwhile, the unidentified man became known as the Rolex Man, adding to the mystery. Several weeks later, investigators received a name, Ronald Joseph Platt, through records maintained by Rolex. The medical examiner also received dental records to support this identification. Ronald Joseph Platt was a 51-year-old TV repairman who was born in Calgary, Canada in 1945. His family later relocated to Britain. He was unmarried and had served as a soldier in the British Army during his national service. Close friends described him as a reserved and introverted individual who had a deep affection for his home country, Canada. He had a keen interest in electronics and precision engineering, which led him to purchase a Rolex watch in Germany in 1967. It was one of his most cherished possessions, and his former partners mentioned that Platt would not even remove it while showering. Armed with this information, investigators aimed to uncover the exact circumstances surrounding Platt's presence on the fishing trawler. Detective Constable Ian Cleanahan of the Devon and Cornwall Police was assigned to the case from the very beginning. Platt's last known address was discovered by the police to be in Essex, which was hundreds of miles away from where his body was found. Cleanahan reached out to the Essex Police Department and Detective Sergeant Peter Redman offered his assistance by visiting the address. Upon visiting the property, Redman found it to be vacant and contacted the landlord, who informed him that the owner had moved some time ago. However, the landlord provided Redmond with a reference letter that contained the forwarding address and contact number of a person named David Davis. Redmond called the provided number and managed to establish contact with Davis. After inquiring about Platt and Davis's relationship, Redmond explained that the body discovered in Devon could possibly be that of Platt. Davis agreed to visit the Essex police and Redmond met with him, finding him to be friendly and confident. albeit quiet and not particularly curious about Platt's death. When prompted, Davis revealed that he and Platt had been friends for several years, and the last time they had met, he had loaned Platt money to start a business in France. According to Davis, Platt had been living in France since then. During the interview, Redmond learned that the tattoo on Platt's hand was actually a maple leaf which symbolized Platt's love for Canada. Davis left the station after providing all the information he could, promising to send Redmond a photo of Platt. Days later, Redmond received the promised photo from Davis. The investigation in Essex concluded with the theory that Platt had fallen overboard and drowned in the channel, aligning with Davis's account of an unfortunate accident. As the case in Essex wrapped up, Cleanhen needed to tie up loose ends on his end. Despite multiple attempts, he was unable to reach Davis. He sought out his colleague Redmond in Essex for assistance in reaching out to Davis. Redmond agreed and went to visit Davis at his residence in Woodham Walter. This area of Essex was quite rural, with only 4 houses, each identified by a name rather than a number. Redmond knocked on the first door, where an elderly couple greeted him. When Redmond mentioned he was looking for David Davis, the couple informed him that their neighbor was actually Ron Platt, not Davis. As they described Platt to Redmond, he realized they were referring to the same man he had previously met with. Sensing something amiss, Redmond contacted Cleanhen and Devon to share this unexpected turn of events. Detectives from both counties now understood that there was more to the situation than initially apparent. Redmond began focusing on gathering information about the individual impersonating his deceased friend. He revisited the elderly couple, Frank and Aubrey, who shared the story of Ron Platt, his young wife, and their 2 children. They mentioned that Platt and his family frequently vacationed in Devon, where they owned a yacht, although they couldn't recall the name. Meanwhile, Cleanhen and Devon re-examined the evidence, starting with questioning old witnesses. His first interview was with John Kopech, who mentioned that an anchor weighing 10 pounds was found along with Platt's body. Kopech passed the anchor to a friend, who then gave it to his mother for sale. Fortunately, the anchor remained unsold, allowing investigators to retrieve and secure it as evidence. Cleanhen proceeded to interview individuals acquainted with Platt, including his brother Brian, who revealed details about Elaine Boyes, Platt's former partner of 13 years. Investigators visited Boyes and uncovered the link between Platt and Davis. Boyes first crossed paths with Davis in 1991 while working as a receptionist at a fine arts auctioneer in Harrogate, England. She vividly recalled Davis's tall stature, engaging personality, and charming demeanor. Their conversation initially revolved around Davis's potential move to Yorkshire, but quickly shifted towards employment opportunities. Davis expressed his desire for Boyce to join his company, despite her plans to relocate to Canada with Platt in the near future. Persuasively, Davis assured Boyce that he could assist them in saving up for their move. Before long, Boyce found herself working as an executive assistant for Davis. She eventually introduced Platt to Davis, leading to a strong bond between the 2 men. Mesmerized by Davis's extravagant tales and luxurious lifestyle, couple gladly accepted his offer to become directors of the Cavendish Corporation. Initially hesitant, Boyce was reassured by Davis's explanation for keeping his name discreet due to his ex-wife's financial demands. Over time, the couple placed their trust in Davis, believing in his sincerity and reliability. As Davis involved them in brokering deals across Europe, they unquestioningly deposited money into foreign bank accounts at his request. With unwavering faith in Davis's character and integrity, Boyce and Platt viewed him as a trustworthy and infallible friend. On Christmas Day in 1992, Davis extended an invitation for the couple to spend the day with him and his daughter. Following a delightful meal, they exchanged gifts, with Boyce receiving a card containing an extraordinary offer. Davis had promised to provide them with 2 tickets to Canada, to be used before February 1993. While Boyce felt overwhelmed by the sudden opportunity, Platt was overjoyed at the prospect of fulfilling his lifelong dream of returning to Canada, all thanks to the generosity of their newfound friend. Davis persuaded them that it would be more beneficial to start their new life sooner rather than later. Davis promptly made arrangements for their upcoming departure. He recommended to Boyes and Platt have rubber stamps of their signatures created in case he needed to sign any urgent documents. Additionally, he held on to their driver's licenses in case proof of identity was necessary. The couple found this request reasonable as they trusted Davis, who had just given them the push they needed. Consequently, in February of 1993, Boyce and Platt flew to Canada to kickstart their new journey. However, Canada did not provide the fresh start the couple had envisioned. They arrived in the country during the harsh winter season. Job opportunities were scarce, leading to financial struggles that eventually strained their relationship. Despite their efforts to make things work, the mounting tension drove them apart. 5 months later, Boyes returned to England to participate in her sister's wedding as a bridesmaid, with no intention of going back to Canada. Davis, who had become a family friend, was also invited to the wedding. During the event, he spoke with Boyes and inquired about Platt. Learning that Boyes had no plans of returning to Canada and that her relationship with Platt had ended, Davis attempted to persuade her to give Platt another chance. When Boyes declined, Davis abruptly changed his approach. He swiftly packed up his life and family, leaving Boyes with only a mobile number. Their friendship faded away and the calls eventually ceased. Boyes and Platt also lost touch. Since departing from Canada, Boyes had no communication with her former partner, Platt, or her once close friend, Davis. Therefore, when Davis reached out to Boyes in late 1996, she didn't think much of their spontaneous conversation as they had little to discuss. Despite the passage of time, he made no mention of Platt and the conversation ended there. He neglected to inform her about Platt's passing. After the interview concluded, Boyes informed the police that she harbored suspicions about Davis's involvement in Platt's death. Boyes acted as the crucial link between Davis and Platt, yet investigators required more concrete evidence. They proceeded to interview witnesses. Following the wedding in Harrogate, Davis swiftly departed with his family to Devon. There he assumed the identity of Ron Platt. Davis introduced his pregnant daughter as his wife, alternating between calling her Elaine Boyes and Noelle Platt. It was widely known that Davis owned a yacht. Witnesses claimed to have seen Platt and Davis together a month prior to the discovery of Platt's body. Allegedly, they checked into the steam packet inn under the aliases of brothers David and Ronald Platt. The police had already discerned that Davis was deceitful regarding Platt and his demise. However, they needed a final piece of evidence. Upon examining mobile records, it was revealed that Davis's calls originated from the same location where Platt was believed to have drowned. Essex police devised a plan to apprehend Davis on suspicion of Platt's murder. Acting on a tip from Boyes, they awaited Davis's arrival at Chelmsford train station. Despite evading initial capture, Redmond persisted and surveilled the family home. Observing suspicious activity, he called for backup before making a move. There were concerns that Davis might be armed. As they prepared to act, a taxi pulled up to the driveway and Davis fled as the taxi sped away. A pursuit ensued, resulting in Davis's eventual arrest. With a gun aimed at him, Davis surrendered peacefully. Unbeknownst to the police, this was merely the beginning. Davis was taken into custody and his fingerprints were analyzed. A search through an international database uncovered a new layer to the unfolding narrative. The fingerprints matched those of a man named Albert Johnson Walker, who was ranked 4th on Interpol's wanted list and was Canada's most sought-after fugitive. Walker's story began in Canada 6 years prior to the discovery of Platt's body in the Atlantic Ocean. Born in Hamilton, Ontario on August 9, 1945, Walker had always harbored big dreams. Despite being a high school dropout, he possessed a charismatic presence. He worked as a bank teller and spent much of his leisure time socializing in Ontario. It was at a social gathering where he met his ex-wife, Barbara MacDonald. Following a whirlwind romance that lasted only 4 days, he proposed to her, and they tied the knot in 1968. The couple started a family early on, having 3 daughters and 4 sons. They raised their family in Paris, Ontario. After years of assisting others with financial matters, Walker and Barbara established a freelance bookkeeping business. The business flourished, and within a decade he was overseeing 6 branches and employing over 30 individuals. Friends eagerly invested with them. However, unbeknownst to them, he was diverting their funds into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Eventually, cracks began to surface. His marriage crumbled due to his numerous extramarital affairs. The individuals he was embezzling from started to ask questions, prompting Walker to flee in 1990, claiming he was taking their 15-year-old daughter Sheena on a skiing trip to Europe. Barbara, realizing the truth, reported her daughter missing out of concern for her safety. Although the police were on his trail, it abruptly ended in London. Walker assumed a new identity stolen from a client, going by the name David Davis, while Sheena became Noelle. Despite evading authorities, the name David Davis still tied him back to his true identity. In need of a fresh identity, he seized the opportunity when he crossed paths with Ronald Platt. Platt maintained a small circle of friends and was fixated on relocating to Canada. Walker utilized this information to his benefit. The gears were set in motion. Walker finally acquired the identity he desired. However, his plans were thwarted when Platt reached out to him in 1995. Life in Canada did not turn out to be the dream he had envisioned. Platt informed Walker that he was relocating back to Essex to settle near Davis. The solid groundwork Walker was building began to show signs of strain once again. Having two Ronald Platts in the same vicinity with identical birth details was not a situation Walker could afford. Thus he devised a plan. Walker had bought a yacht and christened her Lady Jane. He took his family and Platt to Totnes and Devon to commemorate the vessel's launch. During their time there, the men purchased a new 10-pound anchor, which ironically became crucial evidence in the investigation. Upon returning to Essex, Walker invited Platt for another weekend in Devon. Just two friends enjoying the coast and some fishing. Walker steered the Lady Jane out into open waters, away from any prying eyes on shore. He then struck Platt on the head with the anchor, rendering him unconscious. Walker rifled through Platt's belongings to eliminate any identification before fastening the anchor to his belt and casting him overboard to a watery demise. It seemed like the perfect crime except for one critical oversight made by Walker. He neglected to remove the Rolex watch that ultimately unraveled his meticulously planned escape from justice. Walker's trial commenced in 1998. The court was presented with evidence, including the anchor discovered in the net with Platt's body. Forensic specialists were able to confirm that the wound on Platt's head matched the shape of the anchor. Additionally, traces of zinc were found on the belt of the pants, consistent with the zinc on the anchor. Walker had used the anchor to weigh Platt down by securing it to his belt. Further physical evidence was found during a search of Lady Jane. Hairs matching Platt were discovered on a cushion of the yacht, and Platt's fingerprint was identified on the carrier bag used to transport the anchor back to Lady Jane. Blood was also found near the rails. At his residence, Walker's tendency to hoard ultimately led to his downfall as authorities seized documents that exposed his fraudulent business ventures and deceitful actions. However, it was the testimonies of Boyes and Sheena that sealed his fate. Boyes' statement provided crucial evidence that Walker had a lot at stake if Ron Platt returned to England. On the other hand, Sheena's testimony delivered the final blow. She failed to provide a solid alibi for Walker during the weekend of the murder and confirmed his disheveled and agitated state upon returning from the yacht on the day of the crime. Sheena's account unveiled a new chapter in the saga, shedding light on her life of fear with her father and his manipulative nature. When Walker took the stand, he portrayed himself as charming, claiming that Sheena insisted on accompanying him. Although he confessed to fraud and other offenses, he denied any involvement in Platt's murder, attributing the blood found on the yacht to a fishing accident. Despite his efforts to deceive the court, the jury saw through his lies and swiftly reached a guilty verdict after just 2 hours of deliberation. High Court Justice Neil Butterfield addressed Walker, emphasizing the calculated and ruthless nature of the crime, sentencing him to 15 years to life imprisonment. In 2005, he was permitted to serve his sentence in Canada, where in 2007, at the age of 61, he received an additional 4-year term to be served concurrently. In 2015, he sought parole but withdrew his application last minute. Now, at 75 years old, the Parole Board of Canada has rejected his plea for freedom, denying him both day and full parole. Furthermore, his request to participate in a personal development program on Vancouver Island unaccompanied was also turned down. It appears that Walker may never experience liberty again. Walker successfully carried out an almost flawless criminal act. But fate has a peculiar way of catching up with people. If it weren't for Ronald Platt's authentic Rolex and a series of coincidental events, Walker might have managed to escape the consequences of his actions. The case of the Hawks couple. Thomas and Jackie Hawks set out on a journey that would lead them straight into the grasp of tragedy. Unaware, they made the decision to sell their prized possession, their luxurious yacht, which would plunge them into a dark abyss. Imagine the sun glistening on the calm waters, a final voyage on their treasured vessel, and a potential buyer about to finalize the deal. As the sails billowed in the wind and the waves murmured their secrets, the Hawks ventured into the unknown, oblivious that this very journey would become their eternal shroud. Thomas Hawks and his brother Jim Hawks grew up on a farm in the heart of California. They shared a passion for surfing the rolling waves and navigating the vast open sea. However, life's twists and turns saw Thomas answering the call of duty, trading the embrace of the ocean, and joining the military. He even ventured into the harsh battlegrounds of the Vietnam War, leaving his mark as a veteran. Despite this, his resilience never wavered, and he transitioned into the realm of justice, becoming a dedicated probation officer. Meanwhile, Jim's path led him into the uniform of a police officer, eventually rising to the esteemed position of police chief. Service and duty ran deep in their veins. Thomas was a dedicated bodybuilder. He had sculpted his body, a testament to his unwavering commitment to physical strength. His impressive physique was a symbol of his indomitable will. Life took its course, and Thomas married, bringing 2 sons, Ryan and Matthew, into the world. However, like the changing tides, the journey of their relationship faced unexpected turns, and they ultimately ended up divorcing. Thomas found himself in Prescott, Arizona, starting a new chapter in his life. His sons followed, drawn to their father in this new land. Then, in an unexpected but positive twist of fate, Thomas crossed paths with Jackie. They fell in love, and their hearts entwined, sparking a love that burned brighter than the Arizona sun. However, Jackie carried scars not of the heart, but of life's cruelty, as a past accident had left her unable to bear children of her own. Yet, her love knew no bounds, as she embraced Thomas's sons as her own flesh and blood. This couple had always faced life's demands with unwavering determination. They toiled ceaselessly, their dreams woven into their hearts. Their aspiration to own a vessel, a testament to their hard-earned rewards, became a reality as they bought themselves a 55-foot yacht. They named it Well-Deserved, a name their loved ones deemed as a fitting and well-deserved reward for their unyielding work ethic. They took the vessel to the next level by equipping it with the most advanced technology. With retirement's golden years ahead, Thomas and Jackie set sail along the picturesque West Coast. Mexico's exotic shores, California's rugged coastline, and Catalina Island's enchanting beauty became their playground for the following 2 years. They were without a doubt living the dream they had so ardently envisioned. Life being an ever-evolving story, new chapters beckoned. One of Thomas's sons began a family of his own with the promise of a grandchild on the horizon. Anticipation filled their hearts, the prospect of becoming grandparents, a beacon of joy. Thomas and Jackie then considered the idea of returning to Arizona to be close to their expanding family, and so they made the difficult decision to part with their beloved boat. They decided to sell it in Newport Beach, California, little knowing that this decision would thrust them into the maze of fate, leading to a tragedy they could never have anticipated. The dreams they had so faithfully pursued would take an unexpected and heart-rending turn. In November 2004, they listed their well-deserved yacht for sale at $435,000 through an advertisement in a magazine, choosing to bypass the conventional broker route to save on hefty commissions. With the high price tag for their beloved yacht, which was valued near $500,000, they were confident that the vessel's well-maintained condition would attract eager buyers. But fate had other plans. The first person who responded to their advertisement was not who they had expected. The mysterious individual who reached out was named Skylar Dillion, and what happened next exceeded their initially. They were doubtful when they met Dillion. Thomas, a former probation officer, couldn't help but wonder how someone so young had acquired so much wealth. Skylar's explanation, which included a previous career as a child actor, being part of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers cast, and appearing in commercials, had made him rich. Skylar Dillion made a great offer, a full cash offer, sweetened with an additional $15,000 for some personal items he wants to keep on the boat. To further reduce the Hawk's hesitation, he arrived at the meeting with his pregnant wife, Jennifer Henderson, and their young child. Their seemingly happy family had an effect, slowly melting away the Hawk's worries as trust gradually grew. However, under their friendly exterior, Skylar and Jennifer were hiding a treacherous deceit that would lead to serious consequences. The Hawks were unaware of this as they had developed a strong trust in Dillion. The sea trial, a normal part of boat sales, was set for November 15, 2004 and turned out to be a significant day. Shortly before the trial, on November 12, 2004, the Hawks went on a meaningful trip to Santa Catalina Island near the Los Angeles coast. It was a bittersweet occasion celebrating the upcoming sale of their beloved boat and one final sail on it. Friends and family were told that a buyer had been found, and the sale was close. On November 15th, as the morning sun illuminated the scene, Skylar and his wife arrived with 2 men, one slender and the other muscular. The Hawks were surprised by the presence of these 2 individuals, sparking suspicions. However, Dillion quickly eased their concerns by stating that they were merely acquaintances. He clarified that the well-built man was his accountant. After these explanations, Jennifer and the child stayed behind while the others boarded the boat and set off on their journey. They slowly navigated into the vast open waters, leaving their familiar world behind. Little did they know this voyage would be their last, mysteriously marking the final time anyone would see them. As the sunset and darkness descended, Carter Ford, the port captain of the Lido Isle Yacht Club and a close friend of the Hawks, looked forward to their evening meeting with anticipation. Plans were in place and excitement filled the air. However, when night fell over Newport Harbor like a heavy blanket, an unsettling message disrupted the peace. Jackie called with troubling news that made Ford shiver. The Hawks were on a sea trial which seemed routine, but something felt off. The buyer and his group had kept them out on the water longer than expected, leading to uncertainty. The Hawks promised to contact once they returned, and this was the last anyone heard from them. When the sun rose again, the yacht had returned to Newport Beach, but the couple was nowhere to be found. A puzzling mystery unfolded, as they seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Days passed with no word to their loved ones, their phones silent. To add to the mystery, Jackie's SUV was also missing, leading some to wonder if they had gone on a sudden road trip to enjoy their recent financial success, choosing to disconnect from the world as they celebrated. But the dark reality became clear. The Hawks were not on vacation. Something more sinister had happened to them, and it was only later that they realized this. A week passed, and the unusual silence from the Hawks sparked many questions and concerns. Their loved ones felt the weight of their absence, with a fear that something was wrong. The family turned to Carter Ford in desperation, asking him to go out to the well and investigate. As Ford boarded the boat, he felt a deep sense of concern. Everything seemed to be in disarray, with a lone white towel hanging ominously from one of the portholes. The family was disturbed by the strange scene, and immediately took action by filing a missing persons report. Detectives were called to the scene. They proceeded cautiously, breaking the lock on the cabin door and entering. Inside the boat, there were no signs of violence, but a sinister presence seemed to be lurking in the shadows. Their attention was drawn to a white towel stained with fresh ink, hidden between the bed and the wall. It made them stop and think, prompting disturbing questions. A receipt nearby revealed a troubling list of items: bleach, cleaning supplies, heavy-duty trash bags, and Tums and antacid. The detectives began to connect the pieces of this dark puzzle. The cleaning supplies seemed well suited for a murder, with the trash bags to dispose of evidence, bleach to clean away any traces, and Tums possibly used to calm a stomach, unsettled by the horrific acts. The boat had secrets that scared everyone who entered. Investigators were determined to find out the truth about the yacht's buyers, Skylar and Jennifer. A surveillance team was quickly put together to follow them closely. Undercover officers followed the Dillians, observing them living their daily lives seemingly unaffected by suspicion. They were regular volunteers at a local church, and Jennifer's work as a hairdresser presented no unusual facets. To the world, they appeared utterly ordinary, masking their true nature with chilling adeptness. As detectives delved deeper into their backgrounds, a grim portrait emerged. Skylar Dillian's history bore the stain of a prior conviction for burglary, landing him on probation. Financial scrutiny revealed that the couple was drowning in a staggering $87,000 worth of debt, a dire financial abyss. The investigators were puzzled by a question. How did the couple manage to buy a yacht when they were struggling financially? After looking into Skylar's claims of fame on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they found out he was just an uncredited extra in a few episodes. To add to the mystery, the couple was living in Jennifer's parents' garage. Their desire to own a yacht didn't match their financial situation, leaving the detectives confused. The more they investigated, the more confusing the situation became. Dillian was being questioned intensely, but he stuck to his story that he had bought the yacht legally. Surprisingly, he admitted that the money came from selling drugs. Things got even more intense when he revealed that he had handed over a briefcase full of cleaned money from Mexico, mostly in $100 bills, to Tom. Interestingly, Skylar said that the Hawks had asked him to help with setting up a bank account in Mexico so they could start a new life there. He also mentioned that Tom and Jackie had given him power of attorney, allowing him to control their money and transfer it to Mexico. To strengthen his story, Skylar showed what seemed to be a real power of attorney document with signatures that looked real. Despite denying any role in their disappearance and suggesting the couple may have gone to Mexico, doubts remained. Cell phone records showed the Hawks' phones were near the Mexican border the day after the sea trial with Skylar. Frustrated detectives went back to square one and refocused on the Hawks family, prioritizing the safety of the couple above all else. They sought answers by going to the national news, where a family member appeared on camera asking for help in finding the missing couple and their car. The mystery only grew deeper, capturing the world's attention with its twists and turns. An American citizen in Mexico called in, sparking action in the investigation. He had seen the car they were looking for on the news, and it was right in front of him. Authorities went to a house near Ensenada in Mexico and found the Hawks car. Despite the Hawks been missing for over a month and the fear of something bad happening, there was hope that this could be them. There was a glimmer of optimism. Maybe this was the breakthrough they needed. A Mexican federal agent knocked on the door, leading the way. The names Skylar Dillion and Jennifer came up in the Spanish conversation. The man at the door had a chilling connection. He was an old surfing buddy of Skylar. He casually mentioned that Skylar had given him the car, and then Jennifer, his pregnant wife, had driven him back to the U.S. The detectives quickly collected samples from inside the car and found Skylar's DNA on a heater knob, a signal and struggling to solve the mystery. Armed with the unsettling revelation, the investigators received a tip that Skylar was going to flee. He had asked his probation officer for permission to leave the country, which helped the quick-thinking detectives quickly catch him for money laundering, the crime he had confessed to earlier. Investigators arrived at the garage apartment where Jennifer's parents resided and found a collection of personal items belonging to Tom and Jackie, such as their camera and driver's licenses. Upon inspecting Jackie's driver's license photo, they were surprised to see a striking resemblance to the notary's description, raising further suspicions about her involvement and the legitimacy of her actions. The investigation took a darker turn, shedding light on the unsettling idea that more people may be involved in this mysterious disappearance than previously thought. As the lies began to unravel, it exposed an intricate web of mysteries and secrets waiting to be revealed. In the garage, investigators found a business card belonging to an LAPD detective who worked with Interpol. They contacted the Interpol agent to discuss their investigation into Skylar's possible involvement in the Hawks' disappearance. The Interpol agent then shared that he had encountered Skylar a year earlier during a murder investigation in Mexico involving an American citizen. This connection raised the possibility that Skylar might have been involved in both cases. The main challenge was to find evidence. Detectives found something strange on the yacht. In photos, it had 2 anchors, but in reality, only one. Their suspicions grew as they realized the discrepancy. A chilling theory started to form. Detectives linked anchor absence on yacht to couple's disappearance due to Skylar's ruse concealing sinister plot to steal prized possession. Needed undeniable proof. The net was tightening. Jennifer's actions revealed her involvement in the plot. Her effort to drain Hawks' account was evidence of her awareness of the situation, despite not being on the boat. But at a crucial moment, detectives identified a name in the power of attorney papers. A name that would shift the course in solving this puzzling case. The name belonged to a man who had witnessed the significant transaction. A man named Alonso. Alonso, who was only 19 at the time, resided with his parents and worked as a prison guard. A bond had developed between him and Dillion, while the latter was imprisoned for theft. Skylar had convinced Alonso to accompany him to the meetings. He was the slim man who had gone with him on the sea trial. Offering leniency in his punishment, they made an agreement with Alonso, pushing him to share his perspective and expose the chilling truth about the Hawks' destiny. As the tape recorder started playing, Alonso began to tell a frightening story. He revealed details about a man named John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who was introduced as an accountant by Skylar. However, Kennedy was not an ordinary man. He was actually a notorious gang member and former convict known as John F. Kennedy. Alonso explained how they had planned a dangerous scheme that would bring disaster to the Hawks. Their evil plan involved kidnapping a couple and taking them out to sea to throw them overboard. The frightening story began when John F. Kennedy pretended to be seasick and went below deck. Thomas, concerned for him, went down to check on him and fell into their trap. Skylar followed, and together they attacked Thomas. Amidst the chaos, Jackie asked worried questions. Alonso grabbed her, used a taser to immobilize her, handcuffed her, and took her to another part of the boat. Both Thomas and Jackie found themselves helpless, with their eyes and mouths taped shut. In those harrowing moments, as Jackie struggled to scream through her gag with tears of desperation flowing, Thomas offered a small gesture of solace. Handcuffed together, he tenderly stroked her hand with his fingers, a silent attempt to comfort her in the face of the grim fate that awaited them in the merciless hands of their captors. The grim saga continued as they were taken into the kitchen area where the power of attorney awaited their reluctant signatures. The chilling ultimatum hung in the air like a death knell. cooperate, and perhaps they would be spared, or resist, and death would be their fate. The boat steered into the haunting depths of the ocean near Catalina Island, a place once filled with cherished memories for Tom and Jackie. On the deck of the vessel, they were bound together with a rope, a ghastly prelude to the impending horror. Dillion then disengaged one of the anchors from the boat's bow as he dragged the chain along, the dreadful sound echoing in their ears. They had heard that sound countless times before, but this time, it signaled their inexorable doom. Jackie's pleas for her life were heartbreaking, as she yearned to see her grandchild and believed she was too young to die. Tom assured her they would be together as they faced the cruel reality being cast overboard into the Pacific Ocean. They were pushed from their vessel, dragged down by the anchor, disappearing into the depths. Unfortunately, their bodies were never found, shrouding their fate in mystery. After completing their evil deed, Skylar began a cruel mission to eliminate any evidence of the Hawks' presence. He collected their precious belongings, including photographs, and heartlessly threw them into the deep ocean where their memories faded away, abandoned without any regret. With all traces of the couple gone, Dillion and John F. Kennedy tried to return to a sense of normalcy as they sailed back to Newport Harbor, relaxing and fishing as if the recent events were just a disturbing illusion. Justice caught up with Skylar, Dillion, John F. Kennedy, and Alonzo McShane as they faced 2 counts of first-degree murder. Jennifer Henderson defended her husband's innocence while facing her own reckoning, as she too was charged with 2 counts of murder. Her involvement in the gruesome act was revealed, laying bare her complicity. The chilling murders were driven by a strong desire for money. Myron Gardner, an ex-convict and former gang member, played a key role in connecting Dillion with John F. Kennedy despite not actively participating in the crime. Gardner faced charges of involuntary manslaughter for his part in these events. Justice was served when different juries found them all guilty. Jennifer Henderson was sentenced to 2 life terms in October 2007 without the chance of parole. John Fitzgerald Kennedy received a death sentence on May 1, 2009 and was placed on death row in San Quentin State Prison. Alonzo McShane testified against the others, pleaded guilty, and received a lighter sentence on June 15, 2009, 20 years and 4 months in prison, with the chance of parole in September 2021. In March 2009, Myron Gardner's life changed after spending 4 years in prison. He decided to plead guilty to being an accessory after the crime, which led to the dismissal of the murder charges against him. Meanwhile, Skylar Dillion, also in jail, faced more accusations. He was said to have asked another inmate to carry out a dark plan against his own family members. Things took a darker turn when Dillion was also implicated in the murder of an American citizen named John Javi, who was killed in Mexico in February 2003. Dillion's cousin and father, who were connected to the Javi murder, were considered crucial witnesses in both murder cases. On September 22nd, jury selection began for the trial of Skylar Dillion. Dillion was tried for the murders of Thomas and Jackie Hawks, as well as John Jarvie. The verdict was given on April 10, 2009, with Dillion receiving a death sentence from Judge Frank Vazel in Orange County Superior Court. He was sent to death row at San Quentin State Prison. Before Skylar Dillion was sent to prison, a troubling discovery was made. While incarcerated on March 13, 2008, he performed a disturbing act by partially cutting his own male private part with a razor blade as he wished to remove it. After receiving immediate medical attention, he was taken back to his cell the next day. In an interview, Dillion admitted that his reason for this extreme self-injury was a strong desire to transition to a woman. He had already changed his name from John Julius Jacobson to Skylar Dillion, choosing a gender-neutral name to represent his identity. Defense lawyers claimed that Dillion's need for money to pay for sex reassignment surgery was the hidden reason for the murders of the Hawks. However, it is important to understand that this motive does not justify the terrible crimes he committed. In 2019, Dillion's gender was legally changed to female, and she is now known as Skylar Preciosa Dillion. The Hawks family holds dear the lasting memory of Thomas and Jackie, always engraved in their hearts. These lively individuals, recognized for their adventurous nature, embodied goodness and genuineness. Their destiny took a harsh turn, and even though they have passed away, their spirits persist, shining a timeless light on our recollections. May they rest in eternal peace in paradise. Was that Neil would no longer harm anyone else. The family plans to keep Shannon's memory alive by opening a shelter in her honor. The Los Angeles police believe that Sherry Rasmussen's murder was the result of a burglary gone wrong, which is why the case remained cold for almost 3 decades. Then, When a detective examined the cold case file one fateful morning in 2009, he discovered his first hint that the murderer had been hiding there in front of them all along. Sherry Rasmussen was the love John Rueten's life. The couple first met in the summer of 1984. Sherry was a tall Scandinavian beauty with light brown hair. She had a broad face with high cheekbones and a wide set of eyes beneath heavy, arching eyebrows. John Rueten was an outspoken and endearing young guy with a thick mop of dark hair that made him look like a male model. Sherry and John were athletic and were runners on fast track. At age 25, John Rueten was a recent University of California Los Angeles graduate, and Sherry, who was 2 years older, was the nursing director at the Glendale Adventist Medical Center. Sherry was quite slick. She had enrolled in Loma Linda University at the age of 16, and at the time of her murder, she gave critical care nursing lectures all over the world. She was thought to be intelligent and gorgeous. She was also focused and self-assured. She was an embodiment of the kind of person John aspired to be, or to put it another way, the way he viewed himself at his best. Sherry also had a strong attraction to John. Their bond was effortless and quick. When they met, all of their previous relationships and future ambitions seemed to simply dissolve. They connected and soon became a wedded couple. Their wedding took place in November 1985. After a busy post-wedding holiday season that included joyful visits to both sets of parents, they were settling into their married life pretty easily by the following year. On February 24, 1986, John had begun working at an engineering firm. Sherry was still in bed when he left their Van Nuys apartment in California for work that day. The couple had gone to see a movie the previous night. That Monday morning, Sherry was scheduled to give a motivational speech at work. Managerial tactic she did not feel was effective. She then informed John that she was considering just calling in sick using a back pain she had suffered while doing aerobics the day before as an excuse. John advised her to go to work and get the speech over with. When John left the front door at around 7:20 a.m., Sherry was still contemplating her options under the covers. On other days, Sherry usually left first for work. John dropped off some laundry on his way to work and arrived at his desk just before 8 o'clock. He considered contacting Sherry, but he didn't want to wake her up if she was planning on sleeping in. Midway through the day, he called home and believed she had changed her mind about going to work when there was no response. He soon tried to call her office line. Her secretary informed him that she had not yet seen Sherry. The secretary claimed that on Mondays when Sherry taught her classes, she occasionally failed to stop by her office at all. John made 3 or 4 more attempts to contact their home, but still there was no response. Although it was strange, but Sherry occasionally forgot to switch on the answering machine. John didn't seem really bothered. After the close of work, he ran a few errands, stopping at a UPS store and at the dry cleaner to pick up the laundry he dropped off that morning. On getting home, he was surprised to see the door of the garage opened. The Balboa townhomes were made out of white, 3-story mock Tudor structures with back alley garage access. A little balcony was located just over the garage, in front of 2 sliding glass doors. His and Sherry's cars would just fit in the garage perfectly. However, the BMW he gifted Sherry on their engagement was not in sight. Glass fragments were scattered across the pavement near the garage entry. John immediately assumed that this was glass from a car window. According to him, Sherry must have accidentally run into something while she pulled out. She had clipped the door and damaged the aerial on her car a few weeks prior. Oh dear, what did she do now? John had wondered. John removed the dry cleaning in a plastic bag from the vehicle and ascended the steps leading from the garage to the living room. He didn't start to get worried until he noticed that the inner door to their living room was slightly ajar. He carefully opened the door to peer inside. The sight he saw was one he wouldn't have ever imagined. His wife, who had been lively and chatty a few hours ago, was lying lifeless on the living room floor. Her face was swollen, bruised, and bloodied as she lay on the dark rug with her back to it. She was wearing her red bathrobe and had no shoes on. John initially believed she could be asleep, but as soon as he saw her face, he knew something was terribly wrong. Those who pass away violently stop moving in mid-stride, frequently with a frozen expression of final shock. Sherry's long, delicate leg was slightly raised and bowed at the knee. Her robe was flung open, and her arms were raised and bent as if she was struggling to stand up. When John touched her leg, it felt rigid. Her body was so cold. In order to check for a pulse, he pressed his fingers to her wrist, but there wasn't any. John was struck. He had heard about murders. In Los Angeles, there would be 831 homicides that year. However, Learning about them never gave him hope that something similar may happen to him. Sherry was right in front of him, still shockingly and vividly present to him in every manner, yet completely, irrevocably gone. Her right eyelid was purple, swollen, and closed, and her face was coated in dried blood. Her mouth was open in a final gasp, and her left eye was open and looked up. For hours she had been dead. A black bullet hole was located in the exact middle of her chest, just below the rim of her exquisite form, fitting pink camisole. A terrified John called 911. In 1986, the crime scene was extensively recorded. There seems to have been a brawl. The top of a tall stereo speaker from the room was laying next to Sherry on the rug, flushed against her head. It no longer had any wires attached to it. A broken vase made of gray ceramic with a substantial base was on the ground. The shelves of the hardwood display cabinets were crooked, and a receiver and amplifier protruded forward from the top of the television. A VCR and a CD player were neatly placed at the bottom of the stairs leading from the living room to the second floor, as if they had been assembled for carrying, but were then left behind. The top of the CD player had a single bloody smudge on it. On the east wall and the entrance door there were blood streaks. 2 cords that were braided could be seen on the floor right inside the front entrance. One of them appeared to be the speaker's wire. One of the 2 glass sliding doors to the back balcony on the second floor was broken. This was the glass John had noticed on the sidewalk in front of the garage. Other than the items left on the living room floor, there was no indication of forced entry or theft. However, it was later discovered that Sherry and John's marriage certificate had been taken by the murderer. Homicide Detective Lalmayer found a pink and pale green quilted blanket on the living room chair that had a bullet hole in it and powder burns. A gun had been placed against Sherry's chest after the first shot and fired twice point blank, leaving 2 of what turned out to be 3 holes in her chest. The blanket had been used by the murderer to block out sound. One of the 2 .38 caliber bullets that were found in Sherry's body must have gone straight through her. These 3 shots by themselves would have all been instantly lethal. Someone had intended to erase her from the Earth's surface for good. There was a bite mark on her inner left forearm. A cast was obtained for potential teeth comparison, and the bite mark was swabbed for saliva samples. Police investigators working under Lyle Mayer's direction questioned neighbors, family members, and friends over the ensuing weeks, but they were unable to identify any suspects. A week later, Sherry's silver BMW with the keys in the ignition was discovered parked on a street in Van Nuys. It had many fingerprints, a blood stain, and a strand of brown hair. According to research and community interviews, 2 Latin guys had been breaking into houses in the vicinity, and during one of those break-ins, they had abused a woman. Detectives Mayer's viewpoint from the day of the murder would not change. He claimed the homicide resulted from a robbery gone wrong. However, Nels Rasmussen, Sherry's father, was of the opinion that John's ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Lazarus, who was a cop at the time, killed his daughter. In the months after Sherry and John moved in together, Sherry had confided in her father numerous times. She claimed that Stephanie Lazarus and John attended the same college and got intimate once or twice, but never made their relationship official. On John's 25th birthday, Stephanie threw a surprise birthday party for him. Unknowingly to her, John was seeing someone else. John never considered Stephanie as a girlfriend, and so, he had to let her know that he was now in a serious relationship with Sherry. Stephanie, however, was obviously obsessed with John and wouldn't accept that. She subsequently showed up around John and Sherry. Stephanie Lazarus was athletic, bold, and had black hair. According to Sherry, she had unexpectedly visited their home a few weeks prior to their wedding. She went over to the apartment and left a set of water skis for John to wax. The skis, according to Sherry's father, were nothing more than a pretext for intrusion, and a provocative act. Sherry didn't like that another woman was intruding their home. She and John had a dispute over Stephanie. John, however, informed her that he and Stephanie were no longer together, and that their relationship had never grown that serious, explaining that they had been dorm mates long before lovers. Sherry, however, did not want John to wax those skis. Nels claimed that John did not support Sherry, and would not defend her against Stephanie. Instead, he advised Sherry to appease her. Sherry informed her father that the lady police officer had returned unannounced to pick up the skis that John had waxed against her protests. That time, when John handed her the skis, she made it clear that the woman was not welcome and requested her to go. Stephanie had not been at all discouraged by this. She had returned, this time wearing a Los Angeles Police Department outfit and carrying a revolver around her waist. She claimed to be taking a break. John wasn't around. Usually it was John who remained at home while Sherry left for work. Sherry immediately questioned if this was a regular occurrence. Fiancé leaves for work. An ex-girlfriend drops by. She didn't want to accept it as true. She wished to believe John. A few weeks remained till the wedding. Sherry did not cry easily, but one evening she broke down when talking to her father on the phone. When she and John traveled to Taxan for her birthday, she and her father spoke about it more. Nels reported that his daughter expressed a want for John to intervene and tell Stephanie to leave them alone. But all John ever did was reassure her that he and Stephanie weren't dating and that the best course of action was to ignore her until she eventually left. Nels recalled the visit Stephanie Lazarus made to Sherry's office at the hospital. Sherry had thoroughly described this meeting to her father. She claimed that Stephanie barged into her Glendale office and did so without waiting for the secretary to open the door. This time, the female police officer wore tight shorts and a tube top and a tie that screamed her athleticism and sexiness. She then made a chilling remark that says, "If I can't have John, nobody else will," before leaving Sherry's office. Nels Rasmussen told Detective Lyle Meyer all of these in an interview a day after Sherry's murder, just shortly after he had asked the detective the simple question, "Have you checked out John's ex-girlfriend, the lady cop?" Detective Meyer, however, discarded Nels and testimonies. He then told Nels that he had watched too many TV cop shows. Also, John had contested Nels. He assured Detective Meyer that his father-in-law's descriptions of the encounters were not accurate if Sherry hadn't informed him of them. Detective Meyer stuck to the robbery theory. Nels was shown sketches of two Latin male suspects shortly after the murder, and the burglary scenario was explained. He was unable to identify the sketches, and the overall situation was incomprehensible to him. He had to question the professionalism of these detectives. The residents had evidence of a fight. According to Detective Meyer, the fight might have continued for an hour and a half. Nels questioned how his daughter had managed to hold off two men for so long. Based on the bite mark on the Sherry's forearm, there was speculation that the murderer was a female, given that women tend to bite during a fight. But the idea was rejected. Along with the hole and powder burns on the blanket, Sherry also had a bullet wound in the middle of her chest. Nels was informed by Meyer that his daughter had been assassinated, not only shot and killed. He wondered why a random thief would just come to assassinate a person without taking anything of value in the house. Nels questioned the detectives if they had checked to see if the female police officer was on duty that day. He asked them if they had inspected or photographed her, but the answers were no. Stephanie Lazarus was never contacted by anyone. Sherry Rasmussen's case went cold, and the evidence of her murder was filed away in the commercial storage. Detective Meyers retired in the coming years, and several years were spent by Nels Rasmussen trying to get his daughter's case reopened. In the long run, many investigators declined to do it, and the investigation didn't pick up again until DNA testing was made accessible. In 2001, Sherry Rasmussen's case was reopened for reinvestigation after a committed Los Angeles Police Department homicide team used new technologies to work on old forensic investigations. But detectives were soon left looking for missing evidence on Sherry's case file. Luckily, in 2004, criminalist Jennifer Francis discovered the missing cotton swab containing DNA from the bite mark on Sherry's forearm. The DNA sample was entered into Cody's, and there was no match. However, the saliva and bite mark were determined to belong to a female, disproving the initial theory that a male burglar was responsible. After this discovery, the case was abandoned once more. In 2009, the Los Angeles Police Department renewed the case. After revisiting the documented crime scene, it was determined that the murderer arranged the crime scene to look like a burglary in order to put police off the case. In the notes from the initial investigation, detectives ultimately discovered a single sentence where Stephanie Lazarus's name came up once in the entire case file. Investigators, however, chose to follow the tip. They contacted John Rutan, who is now remarried with kids. He told them that Stephanie Lazarus had indeed been his ex-girlfriend, and her being Sherry's killer was all Nels Rasmussen's theory. He again said he didn't believe she did it. Investigators contacted Nels Rasmussen after 2 decades. Nels was angry at first because the police department wouldn't interview the killer of his child. However, after a positive feedback from the new detectives, he recounted what he had told investigators in the initial phase of the investigation. The detectives were shocked that all his revelations were never documented. When the detectives discovered that Stephanie Lazarus was a police officer, they ran her name through the department directory and came up with their esteemed colleague in the art theft division. She was a reputable figure in the department and had over the years been promoted for her diligence. Regardless, the detectives began to look into their colleague's whereabouts on the day of Sherry's murder. They knew as a cop she would be very careful if she wanted to commit a murder. They soon discovered that she was off duty the day Sherry was killed. They looked into the murder weapon. The investigators were aware that most police officers possess at least 2 weapons, one for duty and one for backup, both legally acquired and registered. Records revealed that Stephanie Lazarus had bought a backup .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver not long after graduating police academy. Detectives tracked the Smith & Wesson revolver used as a backup by Lazarus. It was discovered that Lazarus had notified the Santa Monica police in March 1986, just a few weeks after the murder, that the gun had been stolen. If investigators had been looking at Stephanie Lazarus back in 1986, they would have had access to all of this information. But they did not bother at all. The pattern in the evidence missing from the case file was now starting to become apparent to the detectives. It unmistakably appeared that someone inside the police department had been attempting to protect her. This was something Sherry's father knew and what made him angry at the Los Angeles Police Department for many years. The team of homicide detectives then decided to conceal the investigation until they find answers to apprehend police officer Stephanie Lazarus. They needed a DNA from her, and so a special operations team secretly followed her and her adopted daughter to Costco. When they stopped for a snack at a table outside the building, the team was able to recover the cup and straw she had been using. 2 days later, the lab determined that the mouth on that straw was the mouth that had bitten Sherry Rasmussen's forearm during a violent battle 23 years earlier. During an interview in March 2009, Stephanie denied ever killing Sherry, but was ultimately arrested. 2 years later, in March 2012, Stephanie Lazarus was found guilty of killing Sherry Rasmussen. She was given a 27-year sentence. She and the Los Angeles Police Department had been sued by the Rasmussens. An appeal has been filed against a preliminary judgment declaring the department exempt from similar cases. The police department was reinvestigated, but it turned up no proof of an internal cover-up. The missing evidence from the case file still remains a mystery till today. Brianna Wells was born March 25, 1997, and adopted by Dave and Rochelle at the age of 7. After her parents later divorced, Brianna mostly lived with her father and attended Marcos Denisa High School in Tempe, Arizona, where she ran track. She was also a member of the Tempe Monthly Meeting, which is a Quaker community fellowship. She enjoyed hanging out at local parks, but mostly the Kiwanis Park. She really loved animals, especially horses and her dogs, and dreamed of becoming a canine police officer. She even volunteered at an animal shelter and helped feed the homeless. She was described as very funny and sweet with a warm heart. However, she was also described as having violent outbursts towards her parents. At 9:30 a.m. on December 29, 2014, the 17-year-old's body was discovered by someone taking out their trash in an alley near Mobile Lane in 18th Place in South Phoenix. Police say Brianna had been beaten and shot multiple times, and they believe her body was dumped in the crime-ridden neighborhood. Her father said Brianna was home the night before when he went to bed. Although Brianna did have a troubled childhood and had run away many times, she always returned. According to an online post by her father, she had been at Willow Springs Mental Health Facility in Reno, Nevada because she wasn't stable enough at home. She had been in and out of several institutional settings due to her suicidal ideations. She was also refusing to take her meds or go to therapy. He said that on December 26th, she left home and did not return for 2 whole days. When she did return, she described being at a place possibly South Phoenix where there had been gunfire. He said when he woke the next morning, he learned that she had left again in the middle of the night and left him a note. He said the contents of the note were pleasant in some ways, but very disturbing in others. He became concerned, but she did not have a working cell phone, and so he had no way to reach her. Soon after, he found out the horrible news. Police interviewed neighbors, searched for clues, and followed up on countless leads, but the killer has never been found. As of today, Brianna's murder still remains a mystery, and this case remains unsolved. 57-year-old David Evans lived in Claremont, California, 1985. He was the vice president at a bank and a former school superintendent. David lived alone after he divorced his wife. On October 13, 1985, David's body was found inside his home. He had been beaten badly and suffered blunt force trauma to the head. The discovery was made by Claremont police officers during a possible burglary call at the residence. Evans had been a Duke-educated school administrator who worked as a teacher and school superintendent before shifting gears midlife and entering the banking industry. He had been a pillar of the community who had been liked by everybody. Investigators at the time generated a few leads but were unable to identify any viable suspects, and the case eventually went cold. Authorities took a new look at the case in 2006 after advances in forensic technology had been developed. Investigators found a small amount of DNA left behind at the crime scene and fingerprints belonging to the suspect. In 2020, investigators were able to confirm that the DNA and fingerprints were left at the crime scene belonged to Hilary Marcus Duplessis. Furthermore, investigators established that Duplessis had lived in the San Gabriel Valley area at the time the crime was committed. This is not far from where David lived. They were also able to link him to David's vehicle that had been stolen after his life was taken and abandoned in Corvina, California about 2 hours later. On May 2, 2022, Duplessis was charged with ending the life of David Evans. He is currently incarcerated in a New York State prison serving an extensive sentence for a similar crime and will be eligible for parole in that case in 2033. Duplessis will soon be taken to Los Angeles where he will be arraigned on the new charges. Lieutenant Hugo Renaga said they think they know why Duplessis did what he did, but they don't want to reveal too much information before the case goes to trial. Renaga thanked a team of investigators, including those from the Sheriff's Office, Claremont Police Department, New York State Police, and the New York Department of Corrections for bringing long-awaited justice and closure to the family of David Evans. The case of Jennifer Sabina. Benjamin and Jennifer, both from Wisconsin, didn't meet until many years later. Benjamin served in the U.S. Marine Corps, while Jennifer was a recent addition to the police department. A video recorded 2 years ago features her husband, Benjamin, sharing how they met while he was stationed in Iraq. In February 2005, Benjamin and several fellow Marines were struck by a mortar shell during the war. One Marine lost his life and several others, including Benjamin, were injured by shrapnel. He sustained serious injuries to his leg near the knee, his left arm, chest, and head. Fortunately, he survived the attack. While receiving treatment in Germany, he kept in touch with Jennifer by writing to her every day. Eventually, Benjamin returned to his home base in California. Throughout that time, he continued to email Jennifer frequently, and their relationship gradually developed. After leaving the army, his muscles began to heal, his kneecap recovered, and he started walking and using his arm again. He was even able to begin running. He moved back to Wisconsin and spent more time with Jennifer, and their love grew deeper. One day, he asked her if she would be happy to spend the rest of her life with him, and she said yes. Benjamin was honorably discharged in February 2005. After that, he married Jennifer, and they actively participated in church activities. There, Benjamin worked to overcome the psychological issues he experienced during the war. He also helped others in his church who were going through mental and emotional struggles. On December 24, 2012, Officer Jennifer Sabina was working the night shift. During her duty, she maintained contact with her husband, Benjamin, through text messages. The last message she received was around 3 a.m. At 4:24 a.m., the dispatcher on duty tried to reach her but received no response. Concerned for her safety, a colleague, Stahl, used GPS tracking to locate her police car. He discovered it was likely parked at the Wauwatosa Fire Station on Underwood Avenue, a common spot for officers to take breaks, grab food, or write reports. Stahl arrived at the scene in under 5 minutes. He found the police car and discovered Jennifer lying on the cold sidewalk in front of the fire station. She had suffered multiple head injuries from a weapon. The investigation into Jennifer's death has been ongoing since her body was found. In her 3 years of service, she worked as a police officer in Wauwatosa for 2 years. She is described as intelligent, energetic, always willing to help, and wanting to become a good police officer. State investigators began looking into the crime scene. They found shell casings from 2 different weapons, matching the type of ammunition typically used by the police department in that area. However, Jennifer's service weapon was missing and was not found at the scene. Surveillance cameras in the area were examined for clues about the suspect. Traffic camera footage was also collected to track vehicles entering and leaving the crime scene. Additionally, the snowy ground conditions helped investigators clearly identify tracks leading to and from the scene. If these tracks belonged to the killer, he would be the man Jennifer encountered as she walked out the back door of the fire department. When Benjamin arrived at the Wauwatosa police station that morning, he was promptly questioned about his activities the previous night. which is standard procedure. Benjamin stated that Jennifer left for her night shift around 5:15 p.m. on December 23rd. He did not leave the house until 10 p.m., and the only reason for leaving was to purchase a new video game. After returning home, he did not go out again until the police sergeant called him in the morning, after which he went directly to the station. Benjamin had not received any information about Jennifer over the phone and did not inquire about her condition. However, once at the station and during his questioning by detectives, he eventually asked about her after a few minutes. The police officer faced a difficult task in delivering to him the tragic news. After a moment of silence, when Benjamin calmed down, he shared that his wife was the one who supported him a lot in overcoming his post-war trauma. She was his strong support throughout his psychological struggles, always caring and present by his side. The situation was perplexing. The nature of the case suggests this was a personal attack, as there was no evidence of a criminal incident or altercation. Everything suggested that it was an ambush targeting her specifically. Jennifer had no enemies, and her colleagues knew it. Detectives then asked about Jennifer's mental state the day before she left for work and requested permission to search their home for any clues related to her murder. Benjamin claimed that he and his wife were very happy, and that the night before she left for work, they had hugged and kissed. Later that day, investigators searched their home with Benjamin's permission. During the examination, they discovered 2 holes with bloodstains on the drywall, showing signs consistent with having been caused by a punch. At that moment, the detectives understood that Benjamin was experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder since returning from abroad. They also observed him trying to control his emotions at the police station. Another important discovery at Benjamin's home was a bullet casing. However, no matching bullets were found. Only several corresponding shell casings were present, which raised suspicions. On the same day, Benjamin Sabina was arrested, and his interrogation continued. The investigator pressed him, claiming that something significant had happened that morning, and only he knew the truth. However, he denied any wrongdoing, insisting that his feelings for Jennifer were genuine and that he was not angry with her. He stated that he would never harm her because his love for her was so deep. Furthermore, he stated that if he were present, he would save her and do everything possible to prevent the tragedy from happening on Christmas Day. Detectives from the Wauwatosa Police Department began reviewing video footage from traffic cameras. They concentrated on the area around the fire station at the time of the murder, which occurred at approximately 4 a.m. on December 24th. Surveillance footage from the fire station located east of Benjamin's home showed a black Toyota with tinted windows heading towards the fire station at 1:35 a.m. Later, at 3:45 a.m., the same black Toyota was seen returning west on Burley Street. The timing of the sighting coincided with the time the car left the scene immediately after the incident, and its route matched the route it would have taken to return to his home. When detectives reviewed the video, they checked the parking lot at the police station and confirmed their suspicions. In the parking lot, they discovered a 2012 black Toyota Prius with dark tinted windows. This was the car Benjamin had parked there before he rushed to the station to ask about his wife. A match between the bullet casings found in his home and CCTV footage led to an official search warrant being issued for his home. During the inspection, agents discovered hair that had been washed down the bathtub drain and noted that the shower curtain had been taken down. A trash can was found in the garage, along with dark clothing hidden in the attic. They also discovered a weapon registered to Jennifer and another weapon in the kitchen. As evidence against Benjamin grew, his demeanor shifted from that of a loving husband to that of a ruthless killer. Eventually, he confessed to the crime. He admitted that he had stalked his wife for several days and waited for her outside a fire station for hours. When he spotted her patrol car, he approached and began to attack her. He claimed that she appeared to reach for her weapon, but he was faster. He pulled out the weapon and killed her when she tried to stand up again. When a detective asked if Jennifer recognized her attacker, Benjamin replied that he didn't think she did. He also admitted to punching her in the face multiple times to ensure she was dead. He then shared his disturbing thoughts, revealing that he had contemplated ending his life. He claimed that his loving wife had told him that if he died, she would do the same. Therefore, he rationalized that killing Jennifer was an act of mercy, believing he was sparing her from the pain of having to take her own life after his death. The investigators did not believe Benjamin's story or his complicated reasoning. They found no evidence to support his claim that the murder was motivated by compassion. However, they admitted that he was very jealous. He was upset about the attention Jennifer received from other men, or at least he thought so. Additionally, Benjamin had a known short temper. Just weeks before her death, Jennifer shared with a coworker an episode from Benjamin's life that involved post-traumatic stress disorder. She explained that he experienced flashbacks, especially at night, which could lead to aggressive behavior. She felt anxious about working the night shift because it meant her husband would be home alone in a potentially dangerous situation. There was a serious incident when Benjamin pointed a weapon at Jennifer's head while he was having a nightmare. She shared with her colleagues that Benjamin seemed haunted by horrific memories from his time serving in Iraq. His time in Iraq had deeply affected him. He killed 68 people and lost over 50 friends, witnessing the deaths of those close to him. As a Marine, he had been trained to kill, which led to his own internal struggles. During Benjamin's trial, he was brought into court in a wheelchair, handcuffed, and wearing a special vest designed to prevent self-injury. He faced charges of first-degree murder for the death of his wife, Jennifer Sabina. The state of Wisconsin alleges that Benjamin killed his wife out of jealousy. He was jealous of her career, while he himself was unable to continue serving in the military or working in law enforcement due to his injuries. He was also described as possessive and prone to angry outbursts. However, his defense attorney, Michael Steeney, pointed out that he had a troubled military past and had suffered a traumatic brain injury and severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Psychiatrists also noted that Benjamin's condition was one of the worst they had ever seen. Eventually, Benjamin officially changed his plea to not guilty. Although he had previously admitted his guilt, he now cited mental illness and defects, thereby shifting the focus to psychological evaluations of him. The judge appointed a psychiatrist to assess his mental condition. The prosecution needed to show that Benjamin was aware of his actions. He admitted to stalking his wife in the days leading up to her murder, suggesting that his actions were premeditated. Furthermore, he took steps to cover up his tracks, such as showering extensively to remove evidence. He also hid both weapons in his home and spent several hours denying his guilt to the police, initially reacting with shock and anger. As the trial progressed, the evidence against him grew, and it became clear that he was guilty of the premeditated murder of his wife. Proving Benjamin's innocence due to mental illness or defect is challenging. In his case, 2 psychiatrists testified in court, both agreeing that he had mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder. However, they also concluded that he was still capable of understanding right from wrong and did not find him not guilty by reason of insanity. Therefore, it was clearly established from a medical perspective that Benjamin Sabina was mentally ill but still conscious of his actions. After 6 months, Benjamin changed his plea and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The plea agreement gave him the opportunity to receive a sentence that would make him eligible for parole. He admitted causing Jennifer's death and intending to kill her, which is a violation of Wisconsin law. Jennifer's family supported the plea bargain and expressed their gratitude for it. During the sentencing, Benjamin's mother read a statement to the court, reflecting on how her son had changed after returning from war. She shared that the once joyful and playful Benjamin had become consumed by the emotional scars from his experiences. She mentioned that he suffered from severe PTSD, experienced flashbacks, insomnia, hypervigilance, anxiety, and had even attempted to end his life due to the trauma of the deaths he witnessed while serving. She noted that she wore her son's dog tags as a reminder that the son they had sent to war was not the same person who had come home. Jennifer's mother also testified at Benjamin's sentencing hearing. She recounted that after a sleepless night, she received a call from the funeral home on Christmas Day. She had asked to see her daughter, but they told her that her face was so badly damaged that she shouldn't look at her. She was overwhelmed with panic and tears. Then, on December 26th, Benjamin, whom she considered her son, admitted to killing Jennifer. She forgave him. The minimum sentence for first-degree murder is 20 years, while the maximum sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Prosecutor Mark Williams recommended a sentence of 40 to 60 years. In his final statement, Benjamin expressed remorse, saying he did not mean to do this to Jennifer Sabina and that he was sorry for taking her life. He added that if he could trade his life for hers right now, he would do it without hesitation. The judge considered Benjamin's confession and acceptance of responsibility as positive factors. The key issue for the judge was to determine how long Benjamin would have to wait before he could apply for early release. It's important to note that a petition for parole does not guarantee it will be granted. Ultimately, the parole term was set at 35 years. If Benjamin Sabina is ever approved for parole, he will be 65 years old at that time. The story of Jennifer Sabina is a heartbreaking tragedy that reflects the impact of war and the terrible consequences of being unable to control emotions. She dedicated her entire life to the community and always supported her husband. However, It all ended tragically in an act of violence, leaving her family and friends in deep sorrow. The case of Esmeralda Riches. Today we will find ourselves in the state that occupies almost 3/4 of the island of Haiti. It is the Dominican Republic. Our story begins on the Azure Coast, one of the most popular beaches of the Dominican Republic. A black Honda Accord stopped in a parking lot by the beach. Music was playing softly in the car as 2 men and 3 girls were talking passionately about general topics. They looked like longtime friends who had met for a fun outing. All the passengers got out of the car and walked leisurely towards the sea. A grown man called out to one of the girls and took her hand. He whispered something in her ear, and she shouted to her friends that she would come back later. The beach was practically deserted in the evening, making it a place of rendezvous and solitude. They hurriedly got into the car and talked for a long time. The man stroked her long hair and touched her plump lips, which, like a powerful magnet, attracted his kisses. A few hours after the walk, the girl returned home and went to bed. The next morning, her mother noticed that her daughter had not come to breakfast. She went to her daughter's room and knocked on the door, hoping that the knock would wake her up, but she was met with silence. The woman entered the room and screamed. At the scream, the girl's father came running in. A terrible picture appeared before the parents. The whole bed was flooded with blood, and in the bathroom, on the floor in a pool of blood, lay their daughter. She was dead. From what they saw, the couple's legs gave out, but the father found the strength to call the police. Around 8 a.m., police arrived at the scene, examined the girl's room, and interviewed the parents. The body was taken to the National Institute of Forensic Medical Examination to establish the cause of death. The parents cried and wondered what could have happened to their daughter at home at night. But unfortunately, the events preceding this tragedy began to develop much earlier and escaped the parents' eyes. Today, before us will be a modern story of impossible love between a grown man and a young girl. She was 16-year-old Esmeralda Riches Martinez, born August 23, 2006, in the province of La Altagracia, in the family of restaurant owners Elio Rosti and Isabel Martinez Riches. She grew up in a complete, happy family and had an older sister with whom she was very friendly. Esmeralda grew up to be a very pretty and bright girl. She loved to sing, dance, and displayed her special artistry, which she was proud to show in videos for social media. In 2023, Esmeralda was in her senior year of high school and was planning to go to university. She was always surrounded by friends because the girl's cheerfulness attracted not only her peers to her. 35-year-old John Kelly Martinez was among Esmeralda's close friends. John Kelly entered the public education system after passing a competitive teacher's exam and was undergoing induction for new teachers. He was still on probation, which lasted for 1 year. The pupils took a great liking to the new teacher, as he treated them like friends and had regular outings outside of school. Despite the fact that John was married to another teacher and had 2 daughters, he devoted most of his free time to his students. For a long time, the teacher painstakingly built a trusting relationship with them, disposing them to him. They were mostly bright and beautiful students, such as Esmeralda. The evening walk on February 12, 2023 was a perfectly normal meeting of teacher and female students outside of school. Esmeralda was the last person John Kelly picked up that evening. He followed her into the house, introduced himself as a teacher, and promised to bring her back home. The group of 2 grown men and 3 young female students then headed to the beach in Teacher Kelly's car. After stopping, everyone got out of the car, except John Kelly and Esmeralda. John and Esmeralda were alone for a while, but afterward joined the company. They drank a few beers and took a short walk along the shoreline. Suddenly, Esmeralda felt sick. The girl started bleeding during the walk, forcing them to cut it short and bring her back home. In the morning, her parents found her dead. An autopsy revealed that it was a homicide, but the parents did not get answers to their questions. The National Institute of Forensic Medicine tentatively determined that Esmeralda Riches' death was due to a perineal laceration with severe internal bleeding and hemorrhagic shock following violent acts. As a result of the autopsy, the girl's death was classified as a violent death of undetermined cause. However, the question remained, who dared to do such a thing when Esmeralda was in familiar company on a walk supervised by a teacher? Interviews with the girlfriends and a review of the seized phones provided clarity and identified the first suspect. The testimony of one of the girls who had been out with the teacher and Esmeralda that evening was stunning. She said she saw the professor slip 5 pills into Esmeralda's drink while they were on the beach. The initial findings of the police sparked a lot of talk in the Dominican Republic, where abortion is banned. There was a lot of speculation in the community about the cause of Esmeralda's death. Some said she died of a heart attack, while others were sure she died from blood loss caused by the abortion pills John Kelly had allegedly given her. Everyone hoped that the medical examiner's report would put an end to the rumors and speculation. However, all the speculation dissipated when the results of the forensic examination were ready. Upon learning the results, which ruled out the possibility of pregnancy, Esmeralda's relatives were clearly puzzled and very skeptical. The victim's relatives stated that the family was unhappy that the report ruled out Esmeralda's pregnancy, because this theory best matched what investigators had found out, based on the forensic examiner's tests and findings, as well as the evidence collected during the investigation. After all, a review of the Esmeralda's friends revealed many text messages that, although indirectly, indicated the teacher's long-term interest in the student. After the unsuccessful version of pregnancy, the investigation concluded that John Kelly drugged the girl without her consent and roughly abused her on the beach, which led to profuse blood loss and, a few hours later, to the death of Esmeralda. The results of repeated toxicology tests were pending. Given the progress of the investigation, the prosecutor's office requested a coercive measure against John Kelly Martinez and his alleged accomplice, Ruben Murillo Martinez, as they are the main suspects in the young woman's death. John Kelly Martinez was suspended as a teacher for 90 days without pay because of the evidence collected against him. The prosecutor's office requested a year of preventive detention against John Kelly as the prime suspect in Esmeralda's death. Preventive detention is the imprisonment of a person not as a punishment for a crime they have committed, but as a means of preventing the possible commission of criminal acts by that person for a period of time. New episodes and interviews with witnesses about the student's death, however, have created even more intrigue surrounding this horrific tragedy. After several interrogations, authorities learned that due to severe bleeding, the entire company had to stop several times along the way to help her. But no one took the bleeding Esmeralda to the hospital or called emergency services. Some of these stocks were captured by surveillance cameras where, according to witnesses, the defendants bought alcoholic beverages, and Esmeralda and John went into the restroom together. Later, they also went into the pharmacy to buy medicine, water, and feminine hygiene pads. It was later established that Esmeralda had to completely change her clothes at one of the stops because her own were completely soaked in blood. After Esmeralda was taken home, her parents also noticed that she was bleeding heavily. Thinking it was a woman's menstrual cycle, the mother simply gave her daughter a painkiller to help her fall asleep. It was later discovered from one of the girls' cell phones that Esmeralda had sent her friend an audio message in the early morning hours, asking for help and saying, "Please help me, I'm bleeding." Unfortunately, the friend listened to the recording too late the next day, and Esmeralda was found lifeless on the floor of her bathroom, covered in blood. On February 14th, John Kelly Martinez was arrested by police, and his home was searched the following day. During the search, the clothes he was wearing on the night out with his female students were seized. His cousin, Ruben Murillo, who was the second man present that night, was also accused of trying to hide John's bloody pants. There were many ambiguities in the investigation into the event, and the prosecutor's office should have clarified the situation, rather than making new speculations about an incident that alarmed the public. The public demanded a thorough investigation to determine the real cause of the young girl's death, as many felt that obvious facts on the surface had not been taken into account by the investigators. The investigation involved not only a search of the house where the teacher and his family lived, but also the car in which the crime against Esmeralda may have taken place, triggering the bleeding. The authorities urgently requested the car, but it was discovered that John Kelly's wife had sold it in a hurry. The investigation believed that the hasty sale of the car was an attempt to hide evidence that could prove violent acts. The purchaser of the automobile was Panaga Pilar. After it was learned that a coercive measure would be sought for alleged complicity in the case against J.C. Espinal Rijo, John Kelly's wife, and Frank Panaga, the new owner of the car, the vehicle was finally inspected. However, other than traces of Esmeralda's blood found in the car, no other evidence was discovered. The court ruling determined that there was insufficient evidence to keep J.C. Espinal Rowe in jail, and she was released. The investigation continued for several months, and the prosecutor launched his own inquiry, re-interviewing the three girls who accompanied Esmeralda. Their testimony helped investigators reconstruct the events of that night, minute by minute. At 7:30 p.m., Jean Kelly Martinez, 35, and his cousin, Ruben Murillo Martinez, went to the home of Esmeralda Riches in La Otra Banda with three other girls in the passenger compartment of the car. John excused Esmeralda from her mother, introducing himself as her teacher and telling her of the exciting evening that awaited her daughter and the other students. Esmeralda went along with him. Turned out that originally the whole group was going to go to the fair with amusement rides. But on the way, John changed his mind and altered the destination. Most likely, John Kelly did not intend to go to the fair, but preferred a quiet Mau Beach. On the way to the beach, John stopped the car at a store, where he bought a beer. Returning to the car, he asked his brother to sit in the back seat, while Esmeralda sat in the front. The man had a thermos with him, into which he poured the beer and added 5 unknown pills to the drink. He offered it to Esmeralda without informing her of the contents of the thermos, but one of Jerifen's noticed. Arriving at the beach, the 3 girls got out of the car, leaving Esmeralda and John Kelly alone. They were alone in the car for about 30 minutes, and their prolonged absence was noticed by Esmeralda's friends. After a moment, without explanation, Jean appeared and told everyone to get in the car as they were leaving urgently. They had to make several stops along the way because Esmeralda started bleeding heavily. One of the stops was at 9:45, when they stopped at a gas station parking lot. According to eyewitnesses and CCTV footage, Esmeralda used the cafeteria restroom. Esmeralda's classmate said she asked to stop at the gas station because she needed to visit the ladies' room. And when she went in there with her friends, they noticed her clothes were soaked with blood. There was a lot of blood in the restroom, so much so that the girls had to mop the floor. The girlfriends tried to help Esmeralda. They were very frightened and asked the woman working at the gas station if it was normal. And she said it was not normal and advised them to see a doctor immediately. The girls told John Kelly about it, but the man refused to go to the hospital, saying that if he did, he would go to jail. According to the inspection document, traces of Esmeralda Riches's blood were found. Inspection document. Traces of Esmeralda Riches's blood were found both in the parking lot and in the service restroom. At the gas station, they also stopped at a pharmacy at 10:21 p.m., where they bought some medication, water, and sanitary pads. Authorities obtained surveillance footage and a receipt for the purchase to verify the fact. At 11 p.m., John Kelly returned Esmeralda to her home. She arrived with heavy bleeding that began minutes after she was left alone in the car with her teacher. On February 16th, an official report came back stating that Esmeralda had been very severely and brutally abused, resulting in severe blood loss and hypovolemic shock. As scary as it sounds, this condition could have been stabilized, and medics know how to effectively help a person. But unfortunately, Esmeralda never made it into the life-saving hands of doctors that night. Toxicology testing confirmed the presence in Esmeralda's body of the active ingredient in the pills used to terminate a pregnancy. But it was previously confirmed that Esmeralda was never pregnant. This component is a synthetic gestation with contraceptive effect when taken orally in the recommended dosing regimen. This component suppresses ovulation and fertilization, which most likely indicates that the teacher, John Kelly, was preparing for intimacy with the student he liked. After repeated medical examinations, Esmeralda's body was finally allowed to be buried. The young girl was buried in the Albarno Public Cemetery. As Esmeralda's family and friends said goodbye to her, they described her as a kind and cheerful girl. Her parents bitterly recalled that fateful evening and blamed themselves for entrusting their daughter to a teacher and letting her go for an evening walk with him. On June 4, 2023, after reconstructing the last hours of Esmeralda Riches's life, prosecutors filed charges against math and physical education teacher John Kelly Martinez. On June 12, the La Alta Gracia prosecutor's office filed an indictment and a request to open a trial against Martinez and his cousin, Rubiel Milo Martinez, with the La Alta Gracia Instructional Court. The case was scheduled to be heard on August 23, 2023. However, due to the passage of Storm Franklin, the case against the teacher was rescheduled. On November 24, 2023, the judge ordered that John be retried as the sole defendant in the death of Esmeralda Riches. The trial was scheduled to begin on January 9, 2024, but was again rescheduled because only half of the witnesses called were present. The trial is scheduled for February 2024, before the Collegiate Court of the Penitentiary Chamber of First Instance of La Alta Gracia. The defense attorney urged the court to note that his client can only be charged with violence and accuses the parents of not taking action to avoid the death of their daughter, despite knowing about her problem. The prosecution, for its part, presented more than 40 pieces of evidence, including witness testimony and examination reports. During the hearing, the prosecution also heard testimony from pathologists and forensic experts, who showed the audience all the audio and video materials that had been collected during the painstaking and long work to determine the cause of the girl's death. In his closing statement, the defendant tried to make himself look like a victim. John Kelly Martinez admitted that he and Esmeralda were indeed close that night in the car, but he sincerely tried to assure the court and everyone present that everything was consensual. The important fact, he said, was that when he brought Esmeralda home, she was alive and well. The motion to compel specifies that Martinez voluntarily inflicted the victim with lacerations, abrasions, and contusions that resulted in her death, with severe acute external and internal bleeding and hemorrhagic shock as the terminal mechanism of death, according to the autopsy report. John Kelly Martinez's speech made no impression on the court or those in the audience. On March 14, 2024, Professor John Kelly Martinez, 36, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for violence. John Kelly Martinez will serve his prison term at the Anemia Correctional and Rehabilitation Center in He. Rubio Maro Martinez, cousin of the defendant charged with accessory after the fact, received a conditional enforcement measure consisting of periodic court appearances. Following the enforcement measure against the professor and his cousin, Rich's family attorney, Raimundo Rosario, said the family was satisfied with the restraining measure and would not file a motion to reopen the investigation. The verdict for Houghton eased the pain of Esmeralda's parents a bit. They thanked everyone involved in the investigation and trial. They also indicated that they were satisfied with the verdict. Esmeralda's family did not experience the joy of the teacher's verdict because the acute pain of losing their daughter was forever lodged in their souls. Esmeralda's mother, Isabel Martinez, said she regretted letting her daughter walk with this blessed teacher and 3 friends. I talked to him on the phone and asked, "Are you a teacher?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And I told him, "Take care of my daughter. I'm gonna let her out because she's with you." I was innocent that my daughter was with this man, the mother said. The Ministry of Education provided support to the family and relatives of the deceased girl, as well as to the relatives of the other girls who were with Esmeralda on the day of the tragedy. In their message, they expressed their hope that cases of this nature will not be repeated in the education community and in society at large. With the pain of parents who can never come to terms with their daughter's death, they said, it is their turn to fight for justice. A story that began as a fun evening outing with a visit to the beach turned into a night of terror that cost the life of student Esmeralda Riches, who bled to death after lacerations, abrasions, and bruises inflicted by a man whose parents entrusted with the lives of their children. Obviously, everyone involved in the evening's outing has a share of blame. Unfortunately, because of her parents' excessive strictness, Esmeralda was afraid to ask them for help and tell them what had happened. Sometimes we think that it is easier to conceal for fear of punishment or just to remain misunderstood. But what a pity that in this battle, fear wins, taking precious life. The Inman family projected an image of perfect harmony to those on the outside. They were regular churchgoers every Sunday to all Woodport sing. Yet within their tight-knit circle one could fathom what really happened behind closed doors. Back in 3, William and Sandra Inman's paths crossed at church. He was 18, she just 16. Their union received their parents' blessing, leading to marriage. The couple made their home in the modest community of Logan, located in Hawking County, Ohio. Bill Inman possessed strong religious convictions and balanced his job in construction with playing musical instruments for the Sky of Faith Evangelical Church in Nelsonville, Ohio. Sandra took on the role of managing the household. In 1984, they were delighted to welcome their son, William Jr., to distinguish between father and son. The head of the family was called Bill, while the younger one was known as Will. As time passed, William Jr. grew up. At age 17 in 2001, he met a 15-year-old named Summer Cook at church, quite reminiscent of his parents' encounter. Will and Summer maintained a friendship for 3 years before getting married when Summer turned 18 in 2004. The newlyweds began their life together by residing with Will's parents in a spacious house in Logan, Ohio. In that same year, when Bill reached the age of 39, he envisioned himself as a spiritual guide. Transforming his garage into a makeshift sanctuary, he began hosting gatherings there. Despite local skepticism towards this self-declared minister's actions, his enigmatic garage started to attract neighbors first, then their friends, and more individuals seeking solace through prayer and leaving offerings. By 2005, Will and Summer were overjoyed with the birth of their son Alex. Around this time, financial strains began affecting the Inman household since Bill's religious endeavors were not financially rewarding. This situation led the family to consider relocating to another state in pursuit of better employment opportunities. By 2006, the Inman family had fully resettled in Florida. Both Bill and Will promptly secured employment in hotel construction. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer dedicated themselves to homemaking. and nurturing young Alex. 2 years later, the Inmans made their way back to Ohio from Florida. By then, they had forfeited their Logan home due to an inability to reclaim it and settled in a rental in Vinton's countryside. Starting a new chapter shortly after their relocation, in 2008, and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kelly. By 2010, their family grew with the arrival of another daughter, Alana. As young parents, Will and Summer often sought weekends away for relaxation and rejuvenation. During these times, Bill and Sandra, always supportive, took on the role of caring for their grandchildren. The weekends were filled with joy as they cherished moments with their 3 grandchildren. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman secured a pastor's license and proclaimed himself the head of the Skinnier Faith Church. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable entity named Ranch of Mercy to assist the jobless and homeless. His vision was grand. He wanted to construct a large dwelling for orphans and widows. However, financial resources were quite lacking. To address this issue, Bill conceived a lottery scheme. Each participant would purchase a ticket with proceeds earmarked for building the shelter. The grand prize was either a house or $200,000 plus 99 other significant rewards. The community became aware of this lottery through news and advertisements. Bill initially promoted it door to door, assuring participants of lavish rewards while emphasizing that surplus funds were destined for providing a haven for the destitute. Priced at $10 per ticket, Bill managed to sell 100,000 tickets, amassing $1 million for the project. The drawing was set for September 2010. In June 2010, personal upheaval struck the Inman family when Summer expressed her desire to divorce Will after 6 years of marriage. This declaration came not long after she had penned a significant entry in her personal diary. "I am utterly exhausted from constantly trying to please everyone around me. Do not deserve happiness. Do I not have the right to love someone and feel that love in return? I'm uncertain if now is the appropriate time, but I feel compelled to share everything with Will. Troubles me deeply, yet he deserves to know the truth. He should be aware that I no longer wish to be with him. I need to be alone to rediscover myself and understand my current identity. At this moment, I feel like a servant, perpetually running around and obeying others. I adore my children with all my heart, and would never trade them for anything. However, I don't want them to grow up witnessing their mother merely following orders all the time. I'm unsure how Will might react to this revelation. There's a chance he could become angry, attempt to take the children away, or worse, resort to threats or harm. It's important for our children to see us as equals. I'm aware that Will's parents might turn against me and try to convince me to stay, but such actions won't change anything. Last night, when Will asked me what I wanted, my mind was blank. All I could think of was what I don't want. I don't want to feel unhappy and trapped any longer, but I couldn't bring myself to voice these thoughts. So instead, I sat there in silence. Every day feels like a battle. All I yearn for is rest, to cry and sleep without interruption. But finding a way out of this situation seems impossible at times. My hope is that by the time of my next journal entry, I'll have clarity on how to resolve everything. As the summer progressed, we moved forward with the divorce proceedings. Departing from the Inman residence, I took our son and both daughters along with my personal belongings. We sought refuge at my parents' home. Wanting not to disrupt the children's relationship with their father or grandparents, visits were scheduled regularly for them. 2 months following our separation in August 2010, I began a relationship with Adam Peters while also securing employment at a bank in Logan's downtown area, working in a cleaning capacity due to limited educational background. When September arrived, it marked another significant event, the Ranch of Mercy's house raffle, spearheaded by the Inman family. Although construction on the prize house was supposed to begin, both September and October passed without any progress. No raffle took place, and no explanations were given. The organization didn't seem to rush to refund participants either. By December 1st, 2010, the Inmans got a notice requiring them to leave their rented residence due to significant unpaid rent. In response, Summer and Adam went to collect her remaining belongings from the Inman home. However, they were denied entry. This led Summer to call the police, reporting that her estranged husband was intimidating her and preventing her from retrieving her possessions. When the police arrived, and his parents continued to block access, Will even escalated matters by threatening Adam and clashing with an officer. Consequently, Summer filed a legal complaint against Will. She reflected on their relationship, recalling how idyllic it seemed before marriage, but lamenting its drastic change afterward. Will's behavior reportedly became very controlling, affecting everything from her diet to household responsibilities and even intimate aspects of their life. She wasn't allowed to sleep without his approval and was confined at home without access to her phone or keys. Summer revealed Will's aspirations for a large family, his interest in polygamy, and his activities on related websites, including posting inappropriate images. She also disclosed threats he made if she pursued divorce, and mentioned how her cats mysteriously disappeared, attributed their disappearance nonchalantly to them escaping through an open window. Following Summer's allegations, Will provided his version of events. He justified taking Summer's phone and keys by suggesting he suspected her of infidelity. Regarding the cats, he said that due to their wild behavior and damage caused to furniture and family members, he relocated them to a shelter. As a result of these conflicts and accusations, Will was subjected to a restraining order, preventing him from approaching Summer, and faced penalties and probation amidst further investigations. A fierce battle for custody emerged between the families. The Inmans filed police report against Adam Peters, labeling him a potential threat to the safety of Alex Kelly and Alana. Tragically, Summer's life took a dark turn. On the night March 22, 2011, Summerman, just 25 years old, was finishing her shift at the bank. She wrapped up her cleaning duties after the office had closed. Around 11 p.m., she stepped outside to dispose of the trash. Summer had texted her partner Adam to meet her after work, but he didn't find her by 11:30 p.m. Worried, Adam arrived at the bank and began his search. He discovered her personal items scattered near a dumpster in an alley, her phone, keys, and a music player still playing with headphones nearby in the grass. Her jacket lay there too. Alarmed, Adam immediately contacted Summer's parents to inform them of her disappearance and stressed the need to alert the police swiftly. Initially, Summer's parents called the bank, guessing she might have stayed longer for extra work and misplaced her belongings. Security personnel had no clues about her whereabouts. They then contacted Logan police to report Summer missing, emphasizing her punctuality and that she rarely stayed late at work. Police arrived at the scene where they found Summer's belongings. They heard accounts from 3 eyewitnesses who saw her abduction about an hour earlier. 2 women out for an evening jog reported seeing Summer as she threw out the trash. At that moment, a white Ford Crown Victoria, driven by a blonde woman, 2 individuals dressed in black balaclavas exited the vehicle and forcefully grabbed Summer, shoving her into the back seat despite her resistance and cries for help. One bystander's attempt to intervene was thwarted when the female driver incapacitated him with pepper spray, forcing him to retreat. The car quickly left the area. The 2 jogging witnesses immediately headed to the nearest police station to report what they had witnessed. Their account initially faced skepticism from the police, who found their narrative peculiar and doubted its authenticity, expecting it might be a fabricated story. The police reached the abduction site of Summer Inman just an hour after her parents filed the missing person report. However, initial efforts did not lead to locating the missing 25-year-old. News of Summerman's kidnapping quickly circulated through all local media outlets, capturing the community's attention. Hundreds of Logan's residents united in a concerted effort to locate her. As 3 days elapsed, the possibility of finding Summer safe and sound grew increasingly faint. Throughout this harrowing time, her parents endeavored to maintain hope against despairing thoughts. Shortly before her disappearance, Summer Inman shared a photo on Facebook featuring herself, her new partner Adam, and her children. The image portrayed them as a content family unit. Will Inman, who had access to Adam Peters' Facebook page, surprisingly still on his friends list despite being Summer's current partner, noticed this update. It raises an intriguing question. Why would a husband befriend his wife's new companion? The backstory revealed that Adam, a man without stable employment, had been hired by the Inmans a year earlier, in spring 2010, for various household tasks. It was then that Adam and Summer crossed paths and developed a bond. Despite initial reluctance, Summer eventually reciprocated Adam's affections. Her diary entry reflects this internal conflict. My mind screamed, "Run, get out of here now." But instead I stayed and let him embrace me and then delve deeper. I am very sorry about this. I am guilty. This encounter signified the unraveling of Summer's life within the Inman family. Yearning for happiness and love, she initiated divorce proceedings which were prolonged 5 days before vanishing. Will tested the proposed spousal support per child monthly, suggesting a reduction to $50, given his annual earnings of just $6,000. Will and his parents sought full custody of the children, but their petition was rejected by the court. After losing contact with their grandchildren, Bill and Sandra visibly deteriorated. They lost weight and were clearly affected, as those who knew them concurred that the grandchildren were the light of their lives. In March 2011, amidst the investigation into Summer's disappearance, the Inman family was located. They were found at the residence of Bill's 70-year-old mother in Jackson, Ohio. Bill, Sandra, and Will collectively asserted their ignorance regarding Summer's abduction. The Inmans recounted that on the night of Summer's kidnapping, they were en route to Cleveland to view a new property. However, they encountered car trouble after 3 hours on the road, leading to an overnight ordeal of vehicular repairs on the roadside before returning to Logan the next morning. They maintained that their interactions with Summer were generally amicable with infrequent disputes. Yet they attributed a shift in their familial harmony to Adam Peters' employment in their household, describing this phase as challenging. The trio consistently portrayed Adam as a negative influence, alleging he was the catalyst for the disintegration of their previously harmonious and tightly knit family. The investigation took a crucial turn when police noticed a white Ford Crown Victoria at the Inman family's residence. Upon inspection of the vehicle, a GPS receiver was confiscated. Subsequent examination revealed that on March 22nd, the day Summer was abducted, this car was in Logan. The GPS was deactivated at 5:30 p.m. that evening and reactivated the next morning again in Logan, contradicting the Inman's claim of traveling to Cleveland. Phone records further corroborated that all three family members were in Logan on both March 22nd and 23rd. Additional inquiries revealed that on the morning of March 23rd, around 7:30 a.m., the Inmans were at a car wash engaging in a thorough interior cleaning of the vehicle. Bill, Sandra, and Will were all present, but Summer was notably absent following this event. They visited an auto shop in Cleveland for a tire change. While there, a shop employee noticed something odd. Bill was choosing to replace nearly new tires with used ones, simply because he didn't like his current set change. There was also evidence that the Inmans attempted to modify the car's appearance. Notably, Bill had removed a police spotlight that had previously been mounted on the driver's side door next to the mirror. Bill, Sandra, and Will Inman were apprehended and brought in for interrogation. Prior to their arrest, Bill assured his elderly mother of their innocence, attributing the situation to a test from the devil. Throughout the questioning, they consistently claimed they were unaware of Summer Inman's abduction and didn't know who the kidnapper was. However, after several hours and faced with the possibility of capital punishment if convicted, Sandra Inman's resolve faltered. Eventually, she disclosed the truth. Sandra confessed that they were responsible for Summer's abduction on the night of March 22nd. She detailed how Bill and Will had disguised themselves in black masks. Sandra admitted that her initial plan was merely to abduct and intimidate Summer. However, events took an unexpected and tragic turn. According to Sandra's confession, when Summer was forcibly placed in the car's back seat, Will restrained her with plastic ties around her neck, hands and feet, intending merely to frighten her into granting him access to their children. As the situation escalated, Will realized that Summer was on the brink of unconsciousness. He panicked and desperately searched for a knife to release her, shouting frantically to his mother, "Oh my God, Mom, where's the knife? I can't find it." Amidst their collective fear and desperate search for the knife, the situation worsened. Summer ceased breathing and tragically passed away. Sandra maintained that their objective was never to take Summer's life. They merely sought a resolution to their custody dispute and hoped to ensure regular visits with their grandchildren. On March 29, 2011, a week after the kidnapping, Sandra Inman disclosed the location of the body. Summer's remains were found in a septic tank on the grounds of Skinnier Faith Church near Nelsonville, about 30 kilometers from her workplace. Bill Inman had been involved in the church's construction. This place held personal significance for him and Sandra, as it was where they had married 28 years earlier. The Inmans were regulars at this church. Bill participated in its musical ensemble. Police uncovered the well by removing a concrete slab and unscrewing 6 bolts from the metal lid. When they opened it, they immediately saw Summer's legs. She had been thrown headfirst into the septic tank, still wearing her work attire. Her black t-shirt bore an ironic inscription, "I don't have anger issues, I have issues with idiots." A forensic examination confirmed that Summer had succumbed to strangulation. Apart from marks on her neck, hands, and legs indicating she'd been restrained, no other injuries were found on her body. This highlighted strangulation as the cause of her tragic demise. Sandra revealed that she originally planned to dispose of the body in a river, but reconsidered and decided it would be safer to conceal it in the well near the church. She believed this location would ensure it remained undiscovered for a long time. Sandra admitted to feeling deep shame for her actions and their irreversible consequences. During the subsequent trial, 49-year-old Bill Inman and 28-year-old Will Inman did not take any responsibility for Summer's death. Throughout the proceedings, they stayed mostly silent, showing no visible emotions and avoiding eye contact with Summer's grieving parents. Sandra Inman, at 47 years old, stood out as the only family member who accepted responsibility for her part in the tragic events. She maintained that the plan to intimidate Summer was entirely her own idea. In a deeply emotional moment before sentencing, Sandra, overcome with tears, faced Summer's parents and begged for their forgiveness. Her speech, though broken by sobs and a quivering voice, clearly expressed remorse. Sandra admitted she saw Summer as a daughter and regretted her catastrophic decision. In 2012, the verdict was handed down. All three members of the Inman family were convicted. Bill and Will Inman received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Sandra Inman also got a life sentence but with eligibility for parole after serving 15 years. However, among friends and church members familiar with the family's dynamics, doubts arose about Sandra being the mastermind behind the crime. It was commonly known that Bill had a dominant role in the family and usually made final decisions on all matters. Will, on his part, was seen as a pampered child whose desires were always met by his parents. Those close to the family speculated that Sandra's confession might have been a strategic move to reduce legal consequences for her husband and son. Currently, Alex and Alana are being raised by Summer's family. For quite some time, it was hard to explain to these grandchildren where their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather had gone.